Hi everyone, it's Lindsay and I am super excited to be back on the Imagine channel sharing a fun tutorial with you today on how to create some watercolor ombre backgrounds that are really easy to make. Even if you struggle with watercolor like I do, these will work for you. So I'm using Memento markers today. Now in order to get a really great ombre, I like to go ahead and compare my colors to each other. I have all of my markers swatched out onto 2 by 2 pieces of cardstock. I attach a little piece of watercolor paper on the bottom so I can see what they look like when they get washed out a little bit. I stamp with them also so I can see what they look like because I do a lot of techniques where I do some stamping with my markers. So I chose 4 different colors here. I've got 2 reds, one darker, one lighter, and then 2 reddish oranges that are really, really gorgeous. All the colors, everything that I'm using today is going to be listed down in the description box. So if you have any questions about colors, I'm using that kind of thing, you can head down there to check all of those out. I like to work on 5 by 7 pieces of watercolor paper that I tape down to a hardboard. This keeps everything nice and flat. It's not going to go anywhere or warp on me. And it also gives me a lot of leeway. So if I get a water drop maybe I don't like on one side, I can cut that off whenever I go and cut these down to an A2 size. So I like to start larger with 5 by 7. I get that taped edge too with this so I don't have to worry about any color not going all the way to the edge. It really does help a lot to start larger and then cut down to smaller. So in order to do this, what I like to do is start with my darkest color on the bottom and then just scribble with the marker up to the top of the page. I go about 3/4 of the way up and leave the top quarter of the watercolor paper completely free of any color. Then with a large water brush, I'm using one from Arteza, and it has a very wide bristle. I just start moving the color. I start at the darkest, work my way back and forth and up the page. Super duper simple. I use a lot of water. Again, you're going to want to use a watercolor paper to handle all that water, but just continue to add water and move that color up. You want these colors to blend a little bit, so maybe you don't have exactly the right tone. Everything's going to kind of blend together in the end, and it will all work really well together. Now, once I get the colors where I want it, I decided to add some shimmer to these backgrounds. This is really easy to do with the shimmer spritzes from Imagine. I'm using gold on this one for a nice fall look. And I add this while everything is still wet. Now, once that is on there, I take a heat gun and dry this. You can let this air dry if you want to. That Everything's going to look better if you let it air dry. However, I am impatient, so I use my heat gun to go ahead and dry this, which is why I have it taped to my hardboard. That hardboard absorbs the heat. Nothing's going to warp anything underneath. Now, this is a little shadowy, sorry, but I wanted to get that bright light on there so you could see that gold sparkle from the gold shimmer spritz on that background. It is absolutely stunning. I love the way this one turned out. And you've got that nice ombre look. Now this is my favorite part, removing that masking tape to see that edge. If you wanted to keep that edge on there, start with a smaller panel. But like I said, I like my color to go from edge to edge. So I start with a 5 by 7 piece of watercolor paper and then I trim it down. But that white edge is a cool look, so if you want to keep that, go ahead and just start with a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 piece of watercolor paper. Now on my second panel, I am using some purples. So again, I got my swatch sheets out, or my little swatches, and I just compared colors. Then I chose 3 different purples. One is kind of a pinky color, and then I just start scribbling. I'm starting off with my 5 by 7 sheet of watercolor paper that I have taped down to my hardboard on all 4 sides, so it's not going to warp. Then I start with my darkest color at the bottom and just start scribbling back and forth. I don't go up and down. I want this all to go the same direction. So I've got my darkest, and then I've got my 2 mediums. I am overlapping just a bit here, so I'm going to get that nice blend of color. Then I'll go in with my last lightest color there at the top, and again, stopping about 1/4 of the way from the top. So that is going to be all white right now, but I'll go ahead and bring my color very, very light up into that. That just allows me to really get that color faded out. Now again, start at the bottom with my nice wide watercolor brush and just start moving back and forth, moving that color all the way up the cardstock. This isn't going to want to move as much on your first pass. Keep adding water, keep moving the color. It will start to move around. You've got quite a bit of color on here. You need to go through those layers and really get it moving and start moving it up the cardstock. So my first pass doesn't look that great, but the more I go up the cardstock from the bottom, the better it's going to look. Now I got a little crazy and started splashing some color. That's okay. I'm working on my Imagine Craft mat, so everything's safe. I can just wipe up that color and it's good to go. Now, if you wanted to, you could also tape this piece to the Imagine Craft mat and it would stay nice and flat. I did not want a chance that I would get it too hot. The Imagine Craft mat can handle heat, but I didn't want to overdo it and warp my mat, so I kept it on the hardboard. Now, I am adding the Sparkle Shimmer Spritz to this one. This is my favorite. It is absolutely stunning. You do not get shine like this with any other product. I went ahead and dried it, and look at that. I didn't even take my little paper off to dilute the light. I left this as is, and you can still see that shine. Now, I was not crazy about that bottom color on my purple. So that is a great thing about starting large as well. You can cut down the parts you don't like. I'm cutting these panels down to 4¼ by 5½, and the first one was fine. I was happy with the way it turned out. So I left everything on there. I'll show you on the third one, or on my second one, I actually went ahead and cut a lot of that bottom color off that I just wasn't happy with. But on this fall background, I'm going to go ahead and stencil over it. These watercolor backgrounds make for a really great base layer, and then you can add so much more on top of it. You can add stamping, you can add stenciling, you can add different patterns of things. It really is a fun base layer. Then you can play around with if you don't want that white base layer. So on this one, I'm using a stencil from the Crafters Workshop. This is newer, and through that stencil, I am putting some creative medium in the gold. This is stunning. It doesn't look like much when it's wet, but once it dries, it has this really, really beautiful gold shine to it, even more so than it does here. Now, I like to put it through thick. Go ahead and lift up my stencil, and all the rest that's left on that stencil and on the background, you can scrape that right up and put it back into the jar. There's a closer look at that on the background. It is so gorgeous. To finish this card off, all I did was add a Prayers die cut sentiment that I built up with some craft cardstock. I used about 4 of those and glued them together with the Imagine On Point glue. Then I added the I'm Here For You sentiment underneath that I stamped with the Morocco ink. Now that Morocco ink matches the background so well because I used the Morocco Memento marker. All of these match together, they coordinate together, which is awesome. I added a few gold jewels and this card was finished. Now on my second background, you can see I cut off a lot of that very bottom color that I just wasn't happy with. And on this one, again, I'm going to do some stenciling. But instead of adding like a medium through it, I'm going to add some ink. This is the VersaFine Clair ink, which is a pigment ink. So it's going to sit on top of this and it's not going to soak in at all, which I love. It's going to give me a nice rich black color. I'm using the Nocturne color, and I'm using a jumbo ink dauber to press this through the stencil. When I want a really solid color of ink, I really love the ink applicators from Imagine. This is the jumbo one, so I get a lot further with it and a lot less time, but you can also use the finger daubers as well. Now, once I remove that stencil, I need to go ahead and clean it off. A little tip. Water will make the VersaFine Clear ink seize up, and it's going to be a pain in the butt to get off your stencil. Use alcohol to get this off. Now, a lot of you I know like to use the extra ink off of your stencils to create some fun backgrounds. You can still do that. Just take it, spritz it with alcohol, and place it over a piece of cardstock. and you're going to get a really fun and unique looking background. It is a fun technique to do, and I just thought I would throw that in here so you can see you can still use up that leftover ink. It does not go to waste. You just have a fun little technique that you can do a little bit different. Now, to finish this card off, I went ahead and cut down about a half an inch off the top of this. And I used the prayers die that I used on the card before to cut off the top of that and kind of do a die cut inlay technique. I built up that prayers with about 3 black cardstock die cuts. I added Our Thoughts and with that Nocturne ink at the top, and everything is done on this card too. Super simple and easy to do, and it all started with those ombre backgrounds. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Again, all the supplies are going to be listed down in the description box. Thanks for watching and happy crafting, everyone.